He's leaving to live with his biological father, my wife told me. After I'd paid for everything. I said nothing. Days later, my wife called me, screaming. The dean's office. They said his financial aid was revoked. What did you do? Look, I've sat through some uncomfortable dinners in my life. There was that time my Uncle Jerry announced he was joining a cult at Thanksgiving. There was the evening my college roommate told me he'd been secretly dating my ex for 3 months, while we were still sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with walls thinner than communion wafers. Hell, I once had dinner with a client who spent 45 minutes explaining why he thought birds were government surveillance drones. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the nuclear-grade silence happening at my dining room table on that particular Tuesday evening. The kind of quiet that settles over a room right before someone drops a conversational hand grenade isn't really silence at all. It's more like the universe holding its breath, waiting to see which poor bastard is about to get emotionally carpet-bombed. The air gets thick. Your fork sounds louder than it should. Even the ice cubes in your water glass seem to be sweating nervously. I should have known something was coming when Lydia started using the good plates on a weeknight. Nobody breaks out the wedding china for regular chicken unless they're about to break out some irregular news. My wife sat across from me, attacking her chicken breast with the kind of precision usually reserved for hostage negotiations or defusing bombs. Each slice was deliberate, methodical, like she was conducting surgery on poultry that had personally wronged her. I watched her fork hover over a piece she'd just separated from the rest, and that's when she said it. No preamble. No, honey, we need to talk. No warning sirens or emergency broadcast system. Just a casual drop of information that would have made a soap opera writer slow clap. He's leaving to live with his biological father. I'm pretty sure time stopped. Not in the romantic, movie moment kind of way, but in the did I just hear what I think I heard way that makes you question whether you've accidentally slipped into an alternate dimension where logic doesn't exist. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, a piece of chicken dangling like it was waiting for the plot to make sense. She didn't even look up, just kept cutting, like she'd commented on the weather or mentioned we were out of milk. That's how I found out my stepson, Miles, the kid I'd been raising since he was 8 years old, was packing up his life to move in with Gregory. Yeah, Gregory. The same Gregory who'd missed every single parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every birthday party, and every moment that required actual parenting. The guy who disappeared during what I like to call parenting season, and only resurfaced when Miles was old enough to operate a microwave independently. That Gregory. I didn't flip the table, though every muscle in my body was voting for it. I didn't throw my plate against the wall like some dramatic character in a cable drama. I just kept chewing my chicken, slowly, deliberately, while staring at the flaked sea salt she'd used on the vegetables. Again, I'd asked her probably 17 times to just use regular kosher salt like a normal human being. But no, we had to have the artisanal, hand-harvested, blessed by monks sea salt that costs more per ounce than actual gold. Funny how that detail suddenly seemed incredibly important while my brain was processing the fact that my stepson was about to ghost me for a man who thought child support was optional. Internally, my brain was hosting what could only be described as a full-scale riot. Thoughts were screaming, neurons were firing off in random directions, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a little voice was just repeating, plot twist nobody asked for, like a broken record. But externally, I was the picture of calm. I'd learned a long time ago that reacting immediately to Lydia's announcements was like stepping on a landmine, messy, painful, and ultimately pointless. She took a sip of her wine, the expensive Pinot Noir I'd bought last week, naturally, and continued like she was discussing vacation plans. It'll be good for his senior year, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of forced optimism people use when they're trying to convince themselves more than you. They're bonding. Bonding. There it was. My new least favorite word in the English language, dethroning moist and panties in record time. Bonding. Like Gregory had suddenly transformed from an absentee father into some kind of paternal superhero, ready to swoop in and save senior year with his newfound dad skills. Never mind that I was the one who'd sat through 3 years of algebra homework that made me question my own education. Never mind that I was the one who'd driven him to SAT prep at 6 in the morning on Saturdays while Gregory was probably sleeping off whatever midlife crisis he was currently experiencing. They're bonding, she repeated, as if saying it twice would make it make sense. Yeah, bonding. My favorite new euphemism for replacing the guy who paid for braces, car insurance, college applications, and that ridiculously expensive class ring he just had to have. I wanted to ask her if bonding also covered the 4 years of driving him to soccer practice, or the time I stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him finish that Civil War diorama he'd forgotten about until the night before it was due. Did bonding retroactively cover the wisdom teeth removal, the prom tuxedo, or the $1,600 I'd spent on his summer leadership camp? But I didn't ask any of that. I just nodded like one of those bobblehead dolls and took another bite of my overpriced, perfectly seasoned chicken. Then came the real kicker, the piece de resistance, the cherry on top of this disaster sundae. Lydia set down her fork, folded her hands like she was about to lead a prayer, and asked, with the kind of casual tone you'd use to ask someone to pass the butter, "You'll keep paying for continuity, though, right?" Continuity. She actually said continuity. Like I was a subscription service. Like I was Netflix, but for parenting. The Owen Carson Premium Package, featuring unlimited financial support, emotional availability, and the willingness to be treated like an ATM with a heartbeat. Sure, Lydia. Let me just renew my Sucker Premium subscription for another year. Would you like that billed monthly or annually? Do I get a discount for being a complete idiot? I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd been married to for 9 years, and something inside me just clicked. Not broke, clicked. Like a lock finally opening or a puzzle piece sliding into place. She wanted space for Miles and Gregory to bond. Perfect. I'd give her space. Not just room space. Not just house space. I'd give her the whole damn galaxy. All the space in the universe wouldn't be enough for the distance I was about to create. So I nodded. I smiled. I finished my meal like a civilized human being. And then I made a decision that would change everything, though nobody at that table knew it yet. Sometimes the quietest moments contain the loudest turning points, and as I swallowed my last bite of the chicken of doom, I was already planning my exit from a life that had clearly written me out of the script. Game on. You know what's funny about life-changing decisions? They don't always come with orchestral music and dramatic lighting. Sometimes they happen while you're staring at your sock drawer at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, wondering which pairs are worth taking and which ones are just metaphors for your failed marriage. Spoiler alert, the ones with holes in them stayed. I had standards, even in my emotional breakdown. I stood in our bedroom. Sorry, let me correct that. Lydia's bedroom that I'd been paying the mortgage on, and pulled my old suitcase down from the top shelf of the closet. You know the one. That battered, navy blue Samsonite that's been with you since college, survived 3 moves, 2 layoffs, and that disastrous vacation to Cancun where it got dragged through more mud than a political campaign. It smelled like old leather and better decisions, back when my biggest problem was whether to minor in business or psychology. I should have chosen psychology. At least then I might have seen this train wreck coming. The bedroom was quiet except for the sound of zippers and my own breathing, which was surprisingly calm for a man who was essentially rage-packing his way out of a 9-year marriage. No dramatic background score, no melancholy piano, just the steady soundtrack of regret punctuated by the metallic teeth of zippers closing on one chapter of my life. It was almost peaceful in a deeply disturbing way, like the calm you feel right before you tell your boss exactly what you think about their constructive feedback. I started with the essentials. 3 shirts, 1 blue button-down for looking professional, 1 black t-shirt for looking like I had my life together, and 1 gray Henley, because apparently I own more than 1 shade of sadness. 2 pairs of jeans, both dark wash because I'm a man of consistent mediocrity. My laptop, because in the 21st century, leaving without your computer is like leaving without your soul, except your soul doesn't have all your passwords saved in the browser. My passport, because maybe I'd need to flee the country or at least pretend I had the option to flee the country. And socks, the good ones, without holes, because dignity starts from the feet up. What I left behind could fill a psychology textbook chapter titled Material Items That Represent Emotional Investments You'll Never Get Back. The wedding photos in the silver frames we picked out together at that overpriced home goods store where everything smells like cinnamon and false hope. The world's best stepdad, Mug Miles, had given me 3 Christmases ago, back when I was apparently still best. The collection of matching towels Lydia had insisted we needed because couples who coordinate their linens coordinate their lives, which I now recognize as the kind of statement that should have sent me running in the opposite direction while I still had functioning knees. I left the watch she'd given me for our 5th anniversary, the one engraved with forever and always on the back. Turns out forever has a statute of limitations and always comes with terms and conditions. I left the shared Amazon account where I'd been Prime for the whole family, the joint Costco membership that made me feel like a real adult every time I bought toilet paper in bulk, and approximately 7 years worth of, we should really use these someday, items that never got used. Every single emotional investment I'd made since 2006 stayed in that house, packed away in drawers and closets like evidence at a crime scene. The thing about packing light is that it forces you to confront what actually matters, and as I looked at my half-empty suitcase, I realized how little of my stuff was actually mine. Most of my life had been absorbed into ours, our furniture, our subscriptions, our routine, our dreams. Except they weren't really ours, were they? They were hers, with me playing the supporting role of wallet and occasional handyman. I was the financial backing to her life story, the silent producer who funded the show but never got screen time. I grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom, carefully avoiding eye contact with the matching his and hers towel hooks we'd installed last spring. I'd spent 2 hours drilling into tile to mount those things, convinced I was building something permanent. Turns out I was just really good at following IKEA instructions and really bad at reading relationship red flags. I took my toothbrush, my deodorant, the cologne I'd bought myself because Lydia said the one I liked made me smell like a divorced dad trying too hard. Ironic, considering that's exactly what I was about to become. When I was done packing, my entire life fit into one suitcase and a laptop bag. Either I was really good at minimalism or really bad at accumulating meaningful possessions. Probably both. I stood there for a moment, looking around the room one last time, half expecting to feel something profound, sadness, anger, regret. Maybe that movie moment where you realize you're making a terrible mistake. But all I felt was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing. I've been running on empty for years, tired. I picked up my bags and walked out of the bedroom, through the hallway where we'd hung family photos that I'd never technically been part of, past the living room with the couch I'd made 17 payments on, and into the kitchen where this whole mess had started a few hours earlier. The dinner dishes were still in the sink. Lydia's thing was cooking. Mine was apparently cleaning up after everyone, emotionally and literally. I pulled my house key off my keyring, that satisfying little click as it separated from the others, and placed it on the counter next to an overripe peach that had been sitting in the fruit bowl for probably a week. Perfect symbolism. Overripe, past its prime, starting to rot from the inside, but still sitting there like everything was fine. That peach was my marriage in produce form. That's when Lydia finally looked up from her phone. She'd been in the living room, probably texting her sister Mara about how emotional I'd been at dinner, completely oblivious to the fact that I was staging my own personal exodus 15 feet away. Her eyes went from my face to the suitcase to the key on the counter, and I watched the realization hit her like she'd just solved a puzzle she didn't know she was supposed to be working on. Where are you going? For words. Simple question. Loaded with about 9 years of assumptions that I just keep being there, keep paying, keep playing the role of the guy who doesn't make waves. Part of me wanted to unleash every thought I'd been swallowing since that chicken dinner from hell. Part of me wanted to deliver a monologue that would make Aaron Sorkin proud, complete with devastating one-liners and perfectly timed callbacks to every time I'd been taken for granted. To get my dignity back was locked and loaded in my brain, ready to fire. But instead, I smiled. Not a happy smile. More like the smile people wear when they're about to testify in court and they've already decided to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Consequences be damned. It was the smile of a man who'd finally figured out that explaining yourself to someone who's never really listened is just another form of self-punishment. Out, I said simply. And then I walked, one foot in front of the other, suitcase in hand, laptop bag over my shoulder, heading toward the front door like I was catching a flight to anywhere but here. I didn't slam the door. That would have been dramatic. And I was going for quietly dissolving into the night like a ghost who finally figured out he'd been haunting the wrong house. When that door clicked shut behind me, I waited for it. The wave of sadness, the crushing weight of throwing away 9 years, the panic about where I was going to sleep tonight or what I was going to do tomorrow. But it didn't come. Instead, What fell off my shoulders wasn't sadness at all. It was relief. Pure, unadulterated, crystal clear relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally cancel that gym membership you never used, but kept paying for, because canceling felt like admitting defeat. The kind of relief that comes from finally putting down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying until your arms started working again. I stood on the front porch of the house I'd been making payments on for almost a decade, breathed in the cool night air, and smiled. This time it was real. Finding a place to disappear to in the age of Google Maps and cell phone towers is harder than you'd think. Everyone and their mother can track you down these days. Your phone pings your location every 3 seconds like some kind of digital ankle monitor. Your credit card leaves a paper trail that would make Hansel and Gretel jealous. Even your car has GPS built in, probably reporting your coordinates to some satellite that's judging your life choices from space. So when I say I found a cabin so deep in the woods that even Google Maps gave up, I mean it literally threw up its hands and said, "You're on your own, buddy." The place belonged to my college roommate's uncle's cousin or something. One of those family connections that only exists in theory until you desperately need a place to hide from your imploding life. It was 3 hours north of civilization, down a dirt road that wasn't so much a road as a suggestion that cars might occasionally pass through, and surrounded by trees that looked like they'd been standing there since before the invention of bad marriages. Perfect. If I was going to have a breakdown, I was going to have it where the only witnesses were squirrels and possibly a bear who'd be more sympathetic than my soon-to-be ex-wife. The cabin itself looked like something out of a horror movie, except instead of being terrified, I was relieved. Wood paneling that had seen better decades, a porch that creaked like my knees after a long day, and furniture that could generously be described as rustic if you were being kind, or potential tetanus risk if you were being honest. But it had 4 walls, a roof that mostly kept the rain out, and most importantly, Wi-Fi. Because what's the point of disappearing into the wilderness if you can't systematically dismantle your old life using the internet? I dropped my suitcase by the door, which let out a cloud of dust that suggested the last person here had been sometime during the Clinton administration. The first order of business was coffee, because no man should make life-altering financial decisions without caffeine coursing through his veins. Unfortunately, the cabin's coffee situation was limited to a jar of instant crystals that had probably been there since Y2K was still a legitimate concern. I boiled water in a kettle that whistled like it had emphysema and made myself a cup of what could only be described as betrayal in liquid form. It tasted like burned regret with hints of, you should have bought better coffee. But it was hot, it was caffeinated, and it matched my mood perfectly. I took my revenge-flavored coffee to the wooden table that wobbled like my faith in humanity and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim cabin light like a portal to my former life, and boy, was I about to close some doors. First stop, Miles's university billing portal. You know, the one I'd set up 2 years ago when we were doing the whole college preparation thing, and I was still playing the role of supportive stepdad who gives a damn. I logged in. Thank you, password manager, for remembering credentials I'd already started to forget, and there it was. My credit card, sitting there heroically in the payment methods section, ready to catch the next tuition bill like it was its job. Which, I guess it had been. My cursor hovered over the Remove Payment Method button for exactly half a second before I clicked it. No confetti fell from the ceiling. No achievement unlocked notification popped up. No thank you email arrived saying, "Thanks for the $40,000 you've contributed to this young man's education over the past 2 years." Just digital silence and a screen that now said, "No payment methods on file." Beautiful. Poetic, even. Next up, health insurance. This one was trickier because it involved actual phone calls and navigating automated systems designed by people who clearly hate humanity. But I persevered, armed with my coffee of spite and a determination that could move mountains or at least remove dependence from insurance policies. 20 minutes of press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Later, I finally got a human being who sounded as dead inside as I felt. "I need to remove a dependent from my policy," I said, trying to sound casual, like I was canceling a magazine subscription and not severing a financial lifeline. Name of the dependent? Miles Harrison. Relationship? I paused. Former stepson. There was a beat of silence on the other end. And I swear I could hear this customer service rep mentally adding this call to her reasons I drink list. But she processed it without comment, probably because she'd heard worse. When she confirmed the removal, I thanked her and hung up, staring at my laptop screen where the insurance portal now showed one less person under my coverage. Then came the college fund. Oh, the college fund. That beautiful, carefully cultivated nest egg that I'd been feeding for years, watching it grow from a few $100s to a respectable chunk of change that was supposed to ensure Miles could graduate without drowning in debt. I'd set it up in his name with me as the custodian, which meant legally, once he hit 18, he could access it himself. But the monthly contributions? Those were all me. Every single deposit came from my account, my paycheck, my foolish belief that I was building something meaningful. I logged into the account and stared at the balance. Years of automatic transfers, birthday money deposits, tax refund contributions, all sitting there waiting to fund a future that apparently didn't include me. My finger hovered over the transfer button. This was the big one. This was the point of no return. Once I drained this account, there was no pretending I was coming back, no keeping the door open for reconciliation, no, maybe we can work this out. I clicked transfer. All of it. Every penny moved from the college fund to my personal savings account faster than Miles had moved to his real dad's house. The transaction took maybe 30 seconds, and just like that, years of financial planning evaporated like morning dew or my faith in family bonds. The account balance now showed a beautiful, round zero. Not even enough left over for a cafeteria lunch. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting warmed up, and my revenge-flavored coffee was still hot. Netflix account, canceled. Let them figure out what happened to Stranger Things Season 5 on their own dime. Family Spotify Premium, gone. Enjoy the ads, folks. They're free. Unlike the premium subscription I'd been paying for so everyone could listen to their carefully curated playlists without interruption. The grocery store loyalty card. Yes, I even went there. Removed Miles as an authorized user. Good luck getting those discount tomatoes now. Every digital service you can think of, I went through them like a man possessed by the ghost of financial responsibility. Amazon Prime. Removed from family sharing. Disney Plus. Canceled. The cloud storage subscription where Miles backed up his phone. Revoked access. Even the Costco membership that let him get gas for 17 cents cheaper per gallon. Gone. I was on a roll, clicking through websites and apps like I was playing some kind of twisted game show called How Many Services Have You Been Paying For Without Realizing It? By the time midnight rolled around, my digital fingerprints had been wiped cleaner than a crime scene in a procedural drama. Every automatic payment, every shared subscription, every little financial thread that connected me to that family had been severed with the precision of a surgeon and the satisfaction of a man who'd finally figured out he'd been playing a rigged game. I leaned back in the creaky wooden chair, took the last sip of my terrible instant coffee, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even that bitter satisfaction you're supposed to feel when you get revenge. I just felt done. Finished. Like I'd finally closed a book I should have stopped reading chapters ago, but kept going because I hate leaving things unfinished. The cabin was quiet except for the sounds of the forest outside and my laptop fan whirring softly. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even particularly upset anymore. I was just a man who'd finished watching a bad series but stayed through the ending credits out of habit, and now the screen had finally gone dark. Tomorrow, they'd start noticing. But tonight? Tonight was mine. You know what's wild about the digital age? You can disappear into the woods like some kind of modern-day hermit, but you're never really gone. Your digital ghost still haunts the internet, and if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on your perspective, you get to watch your old life implode in real time through the magic of social media. It's like having a front row seat to your own funeral, except everyone thinks you're still alive and paying for things. I woke up on my second morning in the cabin to 17 missed calls from Lydia, 6 text messages that escalated from, "We need to talk," to, "Where are you?" and a notification that Miles had posted on Instagram. Now, I'd removed myself from pretty much every family account I could think of, but I kept my personal social media active because, let's be honest, I wanted to watch the fallout. Call it petty. Call it vindictive. Call it whatever you want. I call it the best entertainment subscription I never had to pay for. But before I got to Miles's post, I want to paint you a picture of what was happening back at the house I used to pay a mortgage on. See, I found out about this later through a friend of a friend whose wife is Lydia's coworker, and apparently the story was too good not to share. The suburban gossip mill works faster than fiber optic internet, and when you're the talk of the neighborhood, word gets around. The night after I left, Lydia did what every woman in crisis does. She called her sister Mara. If you've never met a Mara, let me explain. She's that person in everyone's life who treats terrible decisions like some people treat hobbies. You know the type. She's been divorced twice, engaged 3 times, and has a personal philosophy that can be summed up as consequences are just suggestions. She shows up to family events with a new boyfriend every 6 months and advice nobody asked for. And she's got opinions about everyone's life except her own disaster zone. So Mara shows up at the house, my house, the one I'd been making payments on since Obama's first term, with a bottle of wine from Trader Joe's that probably cost $8. Not even the good stuff. Just boxed wine masquerading as a bottle, the kind that comes with a screw top and broken dreams. They settled into the living room, the one with the sectional I'd bought on a Memorial Day sale, and proceeded to have the kind of conversation that makes you grateful you left. He just walked out, Lydia apparently said, her voice doing that thing where it goes up at the end like she was asking a question instead of stating a fact. Packed a bag and left like some kind of wounded puppy. Wounded puppy. That's rich coming from someone who just casually mentioned at dinner that my stepson was moving out like she was commenting on the weather forecast. But sure, I'm the wounded puppy for having self-respect and a functioning spine. Mara, because she's Mara, poured them both generous glasses of $8 wine and settled in like she was about to deliver the wisdom of the ages. He'll keep paying, she said with the confidence of someone who's never been financially responsible for anything in her life except her own credit card debt. He always does. Men like that, they get emotional, they make their little dramatic exits, but they always come back. Or at least they keep paying. Same difference. And they laughed. I wish I could say I was making this up for dramatic effect, but according to my source, they actually laughed. 2 women who'd somehow convinced themselves they'd cracked the code to free finance, sitting in my living room, drinking cheap wine, and planning a future where I'd just keep funding their lives like some kind of spineless ATM that occasionally made dinner and fixed the garbage disposal. Give him a week, Mara continued, because apparently she was on a roll. He'll be back, apologizing, asking what he can do to make it right. They always do. Men like Owen, they're fixers. They can't stand leaving things broken. The irony of her calling me a fixer while actively encouraging Lydia to break me further wasn't lost on anyone who heard this story later. But in that moment, in that living room, they were 2 geniuses who'd figured out the system. They probably toasted to it, clinking their wine glasses together like they'd just solved world hunger instead of plotting how to continue exploiting someone's generosity. Meanwhile, while his mother and aunt were running their little think tank on my finances, Miles was busy on social media, doing what every 18-year-old does when they think they've made a brilliant life choice, broadcasting it to the internet. I'd been scrolling through my phone, partly to avoid thinking about my instant coffee situation and partly because cabin life gets boring when you don't have Netflix, when I saw it. The post. The picture that launched 1,000 thoughts, none of them charitable. There was Miles, my stepson, the kid I'd driven to soccer practice for 6 years, standing on a porch that looked like it hadn't been painted since the Reagan administration. And next to him, wearing a grin that could only be described as Dad who showed up late to the party but still wants credit, was Gregory. Gregory the ghost. Gregory the disappeared. Gregory the, I'll be right back, just going to get cigarettes, except it lasted 10 years, and he never actually went to buy cigarettes. Miles was holding up a brass key. One of those old school, definitely hasn't been copied at Home Depot keys that looked more decorative than functional. Both of them were smiling like they'd just won the lottery, and the caption? Oh, the caption was chef's kiss levels of ironic. New chapter with my real pops. Key 100 points. Real pops. Real pops. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't having a stroke or that my terrible instant coffee hadn't poisoned my ability to comprehend basic English. This was the same kid who'd called me at 2 in the morning last year because he'd gotten a flat tire and didn't know how to change it, and I'd driven 40 minutes to help him in the rain. The same kid whose college essays I'd proofread 17 times. The same kid whose wisdom teeth removal I'd sat through, listening to him ramble about penguins while high on anesthesia. But sure, Gregory was the real pops. Gregory, who probably thought FAFSA was a new kind of pasta dish. Gregory, who'd missed every milestone, every emergency, every moment that actually required showing up. Gregory, who'd materialized now that the hard part of raising a kid was over and it was time for the fun stuff, like taking credit and posting photos on social media. I stared at that photo for a solid minute, zooming in on Gregory's face like I was examining evidence in a crime scene. He looked older than I remembered, which made sense because the last time I'd seen him was at some custody hearing 9 years ago where he'd shown up 20 minutes late and left early. His hairline had retreated faster than my patience, and he had that look of a guy who thinks he's cooler than he is. Cargo shorts, a band t-shirt for a group that broke up in 2003, and sunglasses hanging from his collar like he was perpetually ready for an outdoor concert that would never happen. The comments on the post were exactly what you'd expect from teenage followers who don't know the full story. Fire emojis. That's awesome, bro. Big moves. Love this for you. Nobody asked where real pops had been for the past decade. Nobody questioned why this new chapter was starting senior year instead of, oh, I don't know, any of the previous 17 years. Just blind support from people whose deepest relationship was with their phone screens. I sat back in my creaky cabin chair, took a sip of my revenge coffee that had gone cold, which somehow made it taste even worse, but also more appropriate, and gave that photo a mental thumbs up. Not because I was happy for them, not because I thought this was going to end well, but because that photo, that caption, that moment of teenage short-sightedness captured on social media for all eternity, was going to age like milk left out in the Arizona sun. See, here's what Miles didn't know yet, what Lydia and Mara hadn't figured out in their wine-fueled strategy session, and what Gregory definitely wasn't going to mention while he was busy playing Father of the Year for the Instagram likes. Real dads don't just show up for photo ops. Real dads show up for the bills, the tuition, the insurance, the everyday, unglamorous, expensive reality of keeping a college-bound kid afloat in a world that costs more every day. And that real dad, the one who'd been doing it for 9 years, had just logged out of every account, removed every payment method, and canceled every subscription. But they didn't know that yet. They were too busy celebrating their brilliant plan and posting their cute photos, completely oblivious to the fact that the financial foundation they were standing on had just been demolished while they were smiling for the camera. I screenshot the post. Not to be bitter. Okay, maybe a little bitter, but mostly because I knew I'd want to remember this moment later. This exact moment when they thought they'd won. This moment before the bills came due and the reality hit. This beautiful, naive, perfectly captured moment of confidence right before the fall. Cute photo though. The lighting was good, the composition was decent, and the irony was absolutely perfect. I should send them a photography tip. Next time, maybe include a disclaimer that says, sponsored by the stepdad we just screwed over. But I didn't. I just saved the screenshot, finished my terrible coffee, and waited. Because the best part about watching a disaster unfold isn't the explosion. It's the moment right before, when everyone's still convinced everything is going to be fine. And according to that Instagram post, that moment was right now. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching dominoes fall, especially when you're the one who set them up. Now, I wasn't sitting in my cabin with binoculars and a bowl of popcorn watching Lydia's life implode in real time. I'm petty, not a psychopath. But I did have my phone, and the digital age has this beautiful way of letting you know when things are going sideways for people who probably deserve it. Call it karma. Call it consequences. Call it the universe's way of balancing the books. It started on a Thursday morning, 3 days after I'd performed my digital scorched earth campaign. I was sitting on the cabin's porch, drinking what had to be my 15th cup of terrible instant coffee. I'd stopped tasting it at this point. It was just hot caffeine delivery system, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. Not to me, technically. See, I'd set up Miles's university email account 2 years ago when he was applying, and in a stroke of either genius or paranoia, I'd added my email as a backup recovery option, which meant I got copies of important notifications. Like this one. The subject line should have been printed on t-shirts, or maybe tattooed on the foreheads of people who take financial support for granted. Urgent. Financial aid status pending review. I opened it, fully aware I was reading someone else's email and not caring even a little bit. The message was written in that special language universities use when they're trying to be professional about the fact that you're about to be in deep trouble. Something about payment methods being declined, account holds, and a request to contact the financial aid office immediately to discuss alternative arrangements. Translation: we tried to charge the card on file. It didn't work, and now someone needs to explain why we shouldn't kick this kid to the curb. I checked the timestamp. The email had been sent at 6 in the morning. It was now 8:30, which meant Miles was probably still asleep, dreaming about his new life with his real pops, completely oblivious to the fact that his academic career was about to hit a financial brick wall at 70 miles per hour. There's something poetic about being blissfully unaware while your world is crumbling. It's like sleeping through an earthquake because you're having a really good dream about pizza. I imagined him there, in Gregory's house. Probably some rental property with carpet from 1987, and that weird smell all old houses have that's part mildew, part regret. Miles would be sprawled out on whatever furniture Gregory had managed to assemble from Facebook Marketplace, his phone charging on the nightstand, alarm set for 9 because nobody needs to wake up early when you're bonding with your biological father. Meanwhile, that email sat in his inbox like a ticking time bomb, waiting for him to wake up and realize that new chapters cost money, and the guy funding his book just closed his account. But the real show was happening back at the house. According to the Suburban Intelligence Network, seriously, neighborhood gossip is more efficient than the CIA. Lydia got a call from the university around 9:15. She was apparently in the middle of her morning routine, which I know from 9 years of marriage consists of exactly 1 hour of bathroom time, a green smoothie that costs more per ounce than premium gasoline, and scrolling through Instagram while pretending she's checking emails. She ignored the call. Classic Lydia move. If it's important, they'll call back, right? Or leave a voicemail, which she'd check sometime next week when she felt like it. She probably thought it was another alumni donation request or some automated reminder about parent weekend. Just another thing she could push off until it became someone else's problem, preferably mine. The universe, having a sense of humor, decided to escalate things. Her BMW, the one with the lease payment I'd been handling for 2 years because it was easier to have it come out of my account, decided to let her know that this month's payment had bounced. Not declined, not insufficient funds. Bounced. Like a rubber check from a cartoon where the bank teller throws it back at you with a sad trombone sound effect. The dealership's automated system sent her a text message with all the warmth of a parking ticket. Payment failed. Contact us immediately to avoid late fees and potential repossession. Repossession. That word probably hit her like a slap from a fish she didn't see coming. I imagine her staring at her phone, reading that text message 3 times like it was written in a foreign language. This had to be a mistake. A glitch. Some computer error. There was no way her car payment had bounced. Car payments don't just bounce. They're automatic. They're reliable. They're handled by, oh no. She called the dealership, probably expecting them to apologize for their system error and assure her everything was fine. I would have paid good money to hear that conversation. Actually, scratch that. I'd already paid enough money. But I bet it went something like this. Hi. Yes, I received a message about my payment. There must be some mistake. Let me check your account, ma'am. Yes, the payment was declined. The card on file was rejected by your bank. That's strange, she probably said, using that tone people use when they're trying to sound confident while internally panicking. I've never had an issue before. No, ma'am. The rep would have replied with the patience of someone who has this conversation 17 times a day. That's not strange. That's accounting. Beautiful. Brutal. Exactly the kind of corporate poetry that makes you remember that businesses don't care about your feelings. They care about their money. And right now, their money wasn't coming from the account they expected it to come from, because that account had been closed tighter than a submarine hatch. But wait, as they say in infomercials, there's more. The grocery delivery she'd scheduled, because apparently going to an actual store is for people who have time to be inconvenienced, didn't show up. She probably waited by the door like a kid waiting for Santa, except instead of presents it was organic kale and that fancy cheese that costs $18 for a piece the size of a Post-it note. The app sent her a notification. We were unable to process your payment. Please update your payment information to complete your order. Then Netflix logged her out, right in the middle of whatever show she was binge-watching to avoid thinking about her problems. Just booted her right to the login screen with a message that was basically the streaming service equivalent of, "You don't work here anymore." She probably tried logging back in 3 times, convinced she'd just mistyped the password, before reality started to sink in. The Spotify playlist she'd been listening to suddenly got interrupted by ads. You know the kind. Overly enthusiastic voices trying to sell you things you don't need while you're trying to enjoy music. For someone who'd had premium for years, ads must have felt like a personal attack from the universe. Which, to be fair, they kind of were. Her phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree with notifications. Payment declined here. Account suspended there. Please update your payment information everywhere. It was like watching someone. Welcome to the subscription canceled era of your life, where every automatic payment you've been taking for granted suddenly stops being automatic, and reality comes with a price tag you can't ignore. This is what happens when you treat people like a service you can just assume will always be there. This is what happens when you confuse bonding with replacing the guy who actually pays for things. The best part? This was just day 3. The late fees hadn't even started yet. The real penalties, the compound interest of bad decisions, that was all still coming. This was just the opening act, the gentle introduction to consequences. The universe was just clearing its throat, getting ready for the main performance. I set my phone down, looked out at the trees surrounding my cabin, and smiled. Not a mean smile. Not even a particularly satisfied smile. Just the smile of a man who'd finally stopped playing a game where the rules were rigged against him from the start. Somewhere, probably about 3 hours south of my peaceful cabin, Lydia was frantically calling banks, checking account balances, and trying to figure out how her perfectly planned life had suddenly turned into a financial obstacle course. And Miles was probably staring at his phone, watching his college dreams encounter the harsh reality of unpaid bills. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had instant coffee to drink and absolutely nothing to fix. And honestly, it was the best morning I'd had in years. You ever notice how people who never call you suddenly have your number memorized when they need something? I could go weeks without hearing from Lydia when things were good. Well, good being a relative term that means when I was silently funding everything and keeping my mouth shut. But the second her carefully constructed financial house of cards started collapsing, my phone lit up like a switchboard on New Year's Eve. By midweek, I'd received 43 calls, 67 text messages, and what I can only assume was every emotion from the entire spectrum of human panic. The voicemails alone could have been compiled into a one-woman show called The 5 Stages of Realizing You Screwed Up. Denial came first, obviously. Messages like, there must be some kind of mistake with the bank, and I'm sure this is just a technical issue. Then came anger. Oh boy, did anger show up with a vengeance. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang for probably the 20th time that day. I was outside the cabin, attempting to chop firewood like some kind of flannel-wearing lumberjack, except I was wearing a polo shirt and had the upper body strength of an accountant who occasionally does push-ups. But something about swinging an axe at inanimate objects felt therapeutic. Each swing was like a physical manifestation of boundaries I should have set years ago. I let the call go to voicemail. Then I sat down on a stump that was older than my marriage and listened to Lydia's voice crack through the speaker like she was auditioning for a reality show about people who make terrible decisions. What did you do, Owen? Not, where are you? Not, are you okay? Not even we need to talk. Just straight to accusations, like I was the villain in a story where she'd cast herself as the innocent victim. The irony was so thick you could serve it at Thanksgiving. Her voice escalated from there, climbing octaves I didn't know she could reach, detailing every single account that had mysteriously stopped working, every payment that had bounced, every service that had been canceled. The BMW dealership called me. Me. Like I'm some kind of deadbeat who doesn't pay her bills. Do you know how humiliating that is? I actually laughed out loud at that one, startling a squirrel that had been watching me butcher the art of firewood preparation. She was worried about humiliation? About being called by the dealership? Not about, oh, I don't know, how humiliating it might have been for me to find out at dinner, chicken dinner, that I was being replaced like a subscription service that had outlived its usefulness. Her voice on the voicemail was so loud I'm pretty sure birds in a 3-mile radius filed noise complaints with whatever organization handles forest acoustics. She went through the list like she was reading charges in court. The car payment, the insurance, the Netflix. Yes, she was genuinely upset about Netflix. The university calling about Miles's tuition, the grocery delivery, even the Costco membership, which apparently she tried to use that morning and discovered she was no longer authorized. You canceled the Costco membership? Are you kidding me right now? The Costco membership. That's what pushed her over the edge. Not the fact that our relationship had imploded. Not the fact that her son had essentially told me to kick rocks. Not any of the actual important stuff. But the bulk toilet paper and discount rotisserie chickens? That was the bridge too far. I saved that voicemail. Archived it like a piece of history that future generations might study in classes about what not to do in relationships 101. Then I went back to chopping wood, each swing punctuated by another memory of being taken for granted. Swing. Remember when she bought a Peloton on my credit card without asking? Swing. Remember when Miles needed a new car that cost more than my first 3 cars combined? Swing. Remember when I was a human being and not a walking ATM? I didn't call her back. Not that day, not the next. I let her voice echo into the digital void like a message in a bottle that nobody wanted to find. She sent follow-up texts, each one more desperate than the last. They started professionally. We need to discuss this like adults. Then got emotional. How could you do this to us? Then landed somewhere in the vicinity of bargaining. If you just call me back, we can figure this out. But here's the thing about figuring things out. You can't figure out a problem when you refuse to acknowledge your part of what caused it. And Lydia? She was still operating under the assumption that I was having some kind of emotional episode, a temporary breakdown that could be fixed with a conversation and maybe some couples therapy she'd expect me to pay for. She had no idea that this wasn't a breakdown. This was a breakthrough. The kind where you finally see the situation clearly, without the fog of obligation and guilt. The kind where you realize that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, according to my intelligence network, shout out to Karen from 3 doors down who apparently has nothing better to do than monitor neighborhood drama. Miles was having his own revelation about how expensive independence actually is. His car, the used Honda Civic that I'd co-signed for because Gregory had the credit score of someone who thought loans were just suggestions, was parked in Gregory's driveway Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, it was gone. Not stolen. Repossessed. Legally and efficiently removed by a tow truck driver who probably does this 17 times a day and has stopped feeling bad about it. Apparently, Miles ran outside barefoot. Barefoot, like he was in some kind of dramatic movie scene. Yelling at the repo guy who was already hooking up the Civic to his truck with the kind of professional detachment that comes from years of watching people realize actions have consequences. That's my car. Miles reportedly shouted, like the power of his declaration would somehow stop illegal repossession. The driver, because he's dealt with this exact situation approximately 9,000 times, didn't even look up from his paperwork. Was past tense. Beautiful. Absolutely poetic. 3 words that contained more truth than Miles had probably heard in months. Was past tense. That should have been the title of this whole chapter of their lives. Your financial support? Was your automatic payments? Past tense. Your assumption that someone would always bail you out? Historical record. I heard Miles tried to call me after that. 37 times, actually. I know because I checked my blocked calls log, a feature I discovered existed about 2 days after leaving and immediately put to good use. Each call went straight to the void, accompanied by increasingly desperate voicemails that I didn't listen to because I'd learned my lesson about consuming content that would just make me angry. Gregory, being the stellar father figure he'd suddenly decided to become, apparently stood on the porch watching his son's car get towed away and offered the kind of sage wisdom you'd expect from someone who'd been absent for a decade. You'll figure something out, buddy. You'll figure something out. That's it. That's the paternal advice. Not, I'll help you. Not, let's call the bank. Not, maybe we should contact Owen and apologize. Just a vague assurance that somehow, through the power of positive thinking and absolutely zero financial resources, Miles would magically solve a problem that required actual money and responsible adults. The local Facebook group, because of course someone posted about it, lit up with the drama. Did anyone else see the repo truck on Maple Street this morning? One comment led to another, and suddenly the whole neighborhood knew that the Harrison kid who'd just moved in with his bio dad had already lost his car. Suburban neighborhoods are basically just gossip delivery systems disguised as communities, and business was booming. Lydia, meanwhile, had moved past anger and landed firmly in panic. Her calls became less accusatory and more desperate. The text shifted from, "How could you," to "Please." That word started showing up a lot. "Please call back. Please let's talk. Please help with the tuition. Please, please, please." Like repetition would somehow make me forget that I'd been treated like an optional expense instead of a human being. Thursday night, around 1 in the morning, because apparently panic doesn't sleep, I got a voice note. Not a call, not a text, but one of those rambling voice messages people send when they're too emotional to type, but not quite ready to actually have a conversation. It was Miles. His voice cracked like cheap speakers from a dollar store. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't realize everything you did for me. I didn't realize how much. I just thought." He trailed off, probably because he couldn't actually articulate what he thought. Because thinking required acknowledging reality. And reality was apparently something neither he nor his mother had been particularly interested in until it sent them a bill they couldn't ignore. I listened to about 30 seconds of it before I deleted the message. Not out of cruelty. Well, maybe a little out of justified anger, but mostly because sorry doesn't pay tuition. Sorry doesn't uncancel car payments. Sorry doesn't retroactively appreciate 9 years of showing up, paying up, and being treated like furniture that occasionally needed to be moved but otherwise could be ignored. 2 hours after Miles's voice note, Lydia sent another email. The subject line was just one word: "Please." The message itself was longer, a rambling essay about mistakes and miscommunication and not understanding the situation. She claimed she hadn't meant for things to go this way. She said Miles was just confused about his feelings and didn't really want to push me out. She promised we could all sit down and talk like a family, work things out, find a solution that worked for everyone. She sent 3 follow-up emails when I didn't respond to the first one. The last one was the shortest. Just 2 words: "Please, Owen." I was sitting by the ocean at that point. Yeah, I'd upgraded from cabin to coastal cottage because apparently cutting toxic people out of your life comes with disposable income. Drinking coffee that I'd actually purchased from a real coffee shop with beans that had been roasted this century. The morning sun was coming up over the water, painting the sky in colors that didn't exist in my old life, and my phone buzzed with that final plea. I read it, thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Then I set my phone down on the small table next to my actually comfortable chair and went back to watching the sunrise. Because sometimes silence is the best punchline. Sometimes not responding is the most powerful response. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them figure out their own problems without rescuing them from the consequences of their choices. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another desperate attempt at contact. I didn't even look at it. Just kept sipping my coffee. Real coffee, the kind that doesn't taste like regret, and watch the waves roll in with the kind of peace that only comes from finally putting yourself first. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes people write poetry about new beginnings and fresh starts. I was on day 7 of my liberation tour, currently posted up in a small coastal town in Maine where the locals minded their own business, and the coffee shops didn't ask you about your feelings when you ordered a black coffee. Just the way God intended. I'd found a little cottage rental that overlooked the ocean, and let me tell you, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic while not being financially drained by ungrateful family members hits different. I was sitting on the deck, bundled up in a flannel jacket I'd bought from a thrift store that smelled like mothballs and better decisions, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. I'd become very selective about what communications I entertained, but something told me this one might be worth answering. Call it intuition. Call it curiosity. Call it the universe serving up entertainment on a silver platter. "Owen Carson." I answered, using my full name because that's what you do when you don't know who's calling and you want to sound like someone who has their life together. "Mr. Carson, this is Dean Patricia Whitmore from the Office of Student Financial Services at Northeastern State University." Her voice had that particular quality of someone who makes difficult phone calls for a living. Professional, measured, and absolutely done with everyone's nonsense. I liked her immediately. "Good morning, Dean Whitmore," I said, taking a sip of my actually decent coffee while a seagull judged me from the deck railing. "I'm calling regarding Miles Harrison's account. We've been trying to reach his family for several days now regarding an urgent financial matter. His mother, Lydia Harrison, has indicated that you might be able to help us resolve this situation." Oh, there it was. Lydia had given them my number, probably spinning some story about how I was just being difficult, and a quick call from an authority figure would bring me back in line. Like I was a kid being called to the principal's office instead of a grown man who'd finally figured out what boundaries were. I see, I said noncommittally, because I wanted to hear how this was going to play out. We have Mrs. Harrison on the line as well, if you don't mind holding for just a moment while we conference her in. Sure, I said, settling deeper into my chair. This was going to be better than any streaming service I'd recently canceled. There was a brief hold music interlude, some instrumental version of a song that was probably popular when I was in high school, and then suddenly Lydia's voice burst through the line like a tornado touching down in a trailer park. Owen, thank God. Listen, there's been a huge misunderstanding. Mrs. Harrison. Dean Whitmore interrupted with the kind of authority that comes from years of dealing with parents who think their emotions override university policy. Let's allow me to explain the situation first, and then we can discuss solutions. I could practically hear Lydia biting her tongue through the phone. Behind her voice, I could make out Miles in the background, probably pacing a hole in Gregory's second-hand carpet, stress-eating whatever snacks Real Pops had managed to stock in his kitchen, which, knowing Gregory, was probably a half-empty bag of chips from 2019 and some questionable lunch meat. Dean Whitmore cleared her throat with the gravity of someone about to read a coroner's report. Mr. Carson, Miles's account currently has a balance of $18,473 due by Monday at 5 p.m. This covers his remaining tuition for the semester, housing fees, and the meal plan. The payment method we had on file was declined, and the backup method has been removed from the system entirely. Without payment or a concrete financial plan by Monday, Miles's enrollment will be terminated, and he'll be required to vacate university housing within 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days to pack up an entire semester's worth of stuff and dreams, because someone forgot that college costs money and money doesn't grow on trees or materialize from biological fathers who've been cosplaying as ghosts for the past decade. That's why we need to talk. Lydia jumped in, her voice doing that thing where it gets higher and faster when she's panicking. Owen has been Miles's primary financial supporter throughout his college career, and I'm sure once he understands the urgency of the situation. I understand the urgency just fine, I said calmly, watching a sailboat drift past on the horizon. Someone out there was having a peaceful morning, and it wasn't anyone on this phone call except me. Then you know we need to get this resolved, Lydia continued, probably nodding enthusiastically like the dean could see her through the phone. I've already explained to Dean Whitmore that this is just a temporary issue, a miscommunication between us, and that you'll confirm the payment arrangement so Miles can continue his education. The audacity, the sheer, unfiltered audacity of this woman to volunteer my money, my commitment, and my future participation in a situation I'd explicitly removed myself from. It was like watching someone try to use a coupon that expired 3 years ago and getting mad when the cashier won't accept it. Mrs. Harrison, Dean Whitmore said, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book and had a filing system for them. I need to hear directly from Mr. Carson regarding his willingness to continue as Miles's financial sponsor. Mr. Carson, are you prepared to submit payment for Miles's outstanding balance and continue funding his education? This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating since I walked out of that house with my dignity in a suitcase. The moment where I could either cave, let them guilt me back into the ATM role I'd been playing for 9 years, or I could stand firm on the boundary I'd set when I placed that house key next to an overripe peach. Miles's voice cracked through the background noise. Please, Owen, I know I messed up. Mr. Carson? Dean Whitmore prompted, professional as ever, probably checking her watch because she had 17 more of these calls to make before lunch. I took a deep breath, not because I needed to gather courage, but because I wanted to savor this moment. This singular, crystalline moment where I got to speak my truth without apology, without softening the blow, without considering everyone else's feelings before my own. I'm not his father, I said. The silence that followed was so profound, so absolute, that I'm pretty sure the entire phone network paused to process what I'd just said. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone drops a truth bomb so direct and undeniable that reality itself needs a moment to recalibrate. I could hear the universe buffering, trying to load the next page of this conversation, but getting stuck on what I'd just declared. I'm sorry, sir, Dean Whitmore said, and I could hear the slight crack in her professional veneer. This probably wasn't in her script for how these calls usually went. I'm not his father, I repeated, my voice steady as the waves hitting the rocks below my deck. Biologically, legally, or apparently even functionally anymore. I was his stepfather. Was being the operative word. Past tense. I provided financial support when I was in a relationship with his mother and when I believed I was a valued member of this family. Neither of those things are true anymore. Owen, don't do this, Lydia started, her voice climbing into registers that probably annoyed dogs in neighboring states. Mrs. Harrison, please, Dean Whitmore interjected, and I had to give her credit. She was maintaining order in what was rapidly becoming a Jerry Springer episode conducted via conference call. Dean Whitmore, I continued, because I was on a roll and honestly, it felt amazing. I'm not listed as Miles's legal guardian. I have no custodial rights, no parental responsibilities, and as of last week, no relationship with this family whatsoever. Miles chose to move in with his biological father, and his mother supported that decision. I respect their choice. I'm simply honoring it by removing myself entirely from the financial equation. But you've been paying, Lydia sputtered. I was listed, I corrected, emphasizing the past tense with the kind of grammatical precision that would make English teachers weep with joy. I was contributing. I was supporting. All past tense. All voluntary. All finished. Miles's voice came through clearer now, closer to the phone, desperate. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to get to know my dad. And that's great, Miles, I said, and I meant it without a trace of sarcasm. You should know your biological father. You should have that relationship. But your biological father can also pay for your biological education. That's how biology works. That's how responsibility works. That's how pretty much everything works when you're not treating people like unlimited ATM machines. Dean Whitmore, to her credit, had probably dealt with messier family situations than this, but I could hear the slight shift in her tone when she spoke next. Mr. Carson, I understand this is a complicated family matter, but from a university standpoint, I need a clear answer. Will you be submitting payment for Miles's account? No, I said simply. One word. 2 letters. Complete sentence. Owen, please, Lydia's voice cracked. I'm not his father. I repeated one final time, letting each word land like a gavel in a courtroom. His father is Gregory Harrison. His father can pay, or his mother can pay, or Miles can take out loans like millions of other students whose stepfathers aren't willing to fund their education after being kicked to the curb. But I won't be paying. Not this semester, not next semester, not ever again. Click. I ended the call. Didn't wait for responses, didn't listen to protests, didn't give anyone the chance to launch into a prepared speech about family obligations or moral responsibilities. Just press that red button and watch the call disconnect with the satisfaction of someone who'd just successfully assembled IKEA furniture on the first try. That was my mic drop. Quiet, clean, and beautifully free of exclamation marks or dramatic declarations. No shouting, no cursing, no emotional outburst that they could later use to paint me as the villain. Just a simple statement of fact delivered with the calm of a man who'd finally found his backbone after years of it being used as a doormat. My phone immediately started ringing again. Lydia. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Text messages started flooding in, each one more desperate than the last. I turned on Do Not Disturb, finished my coffee, and watched that sailboat disappear over the horizon. Somewhere, in a university financial office, Dean Whitmore was probably updating Miles's file with notes about family drama and payment status. Somewhere in a house I used to pay the mortgage on, Lydia was having a complete meltdown. Somewhere in Gregory's rental property with the outdated carpet, Miles was realizing that bonding with bio dad doesn't pay tuition bills. But none of that was my problem anymore. I was just a guy drinking coffee by the ocean, finally learning what peace tastes like. You know what's wild about the internet? It doesn't care about your privacy, your feelings, or your carefully constructed narrative about how you're the victim in your own story. The internet is like that friend who sees through your nonsense and calls you out in front of everyone. Except it's not just one friend. It's millions of strangers with opinions and surprisingly good detective skills. I was 3 days post-legendary phone call, living my best coastal Maine life, when my buddy Marcus hit me up. Marcus and I go way back to college, back when our biggest problems were hangovers and figuring out how to make ramen taste like actual food. He's one of those guys who's perpetually online, knows every meme before it goes mainstream, and somehow always has the inside scoop on internet drama. My phone buzzed with his text. Bro, you've gone viral. Check Reddit. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my first thought was panic. Had someone posted about me? Had Lydia launched some kind of social media smear campaign? Was I about to become one of those cautionary tales people share with the caption, "Can you believe this guy?" Marcus sent me a link. I clicked it, my coffee getting cold in my hand, and there it was. Posted in the r/Ami the Asshole subreddit. Except it wasn't from me. Someone had seen the whole drama unfold. Probably one of those neighborhood gossips who treated other people's problems like their personal Netflix series, and had written up the entire story. The headline was Chef's Kiss Perfection. Teen dumps stepdad who paid for everything to live with bio dad who ghosted him. Guess who's broke now? The post had 63,000 upvotes. 63,000. I'd gone viral for finally having a spine, and honestly, I wasn't even mad about it. The post laid out the whole situation. The dinner announcement, Miles choosing Gregory, me quietly removing all financial support, the car repossession, the university calling. Someone had done their homework, probably piecing together details from multiple sources like they were investigating a true crime podcast. But the real entertainment was in the comments section. Oh man, the comments section was better than any validation therapy could have provided. Thousands of strangers, people who'd never met me, who didn't know me anything, were delivering justice faster than any court system ever could. Stepdad's a legend. Man said not today and actually meant it. She really thought he'd keep paying after they kicked him out? The audacity. This is what happens when you treat people like ATMs. Eventually, they close the account. Play stupid games, win expensive prizes. This family won the grand prize. Someone please give this man a cigar and a medal for biggest power move of 2025. The kid posted Real Pops on Instagram. Hope Real Pops has real money because real bills just came due. Not gonna lie, I'm slow clapping at my desk right now. This is beautiful. I scrolled through hundreds of comments, each one more satisfying than the last. People were dissecting every angle of the situation, pointing out things I hadn't even considered. Someone calculated that I'd probably spent over $200,000 on Miles over the years when you factored in everything: tuition, car, insurance, clothes, food, activities, that expensive summer camp, Christmas presents, birthday gifts, the laptop, the phone, the school supplies. $200,000 for a kid who replaced me with an Instagram post and a brass key. The internet had spoken, and the verdict was unanimous. I was not the villain in this story. But Lydia? Oh, Lydia tried damage control. According to Marcus, who was monitoring this better than the FBI monitors threats, she'd posted something on Facebook. Some inspirational quote with a sunset background that said, "When one chapter closes, another opens. Trust the journey and embrace change. Trust the journey. Trust the journey." The woman whose car was about to be repossessed and whose son was about to get kicked out of college was posting inspirational quotes about embracing change. The comments on her post were not kind. Apparently, several people who'd seen the Reddit post connected the dots and showed up in her Facebook comments with questions she definitely didn't want to answer. Which chapter is the one where you pay your own bills? Is the new chapter the one with the repossessed BMW? Embracing change like embracing responsibility? Novel concept. Someone even posted the Reddit link directly in her comments. She deleted it. They posted it again. She deleted that too. Eventually, she just turned off comments entirely, which is basically the social media equivalent of running away with your hands over your ears. Miles, meanwhile, had gone completely dark on social media. His Instagram, which had been posting regularly gym selfies, food pics, those inspirational quote stories that 18-year-olds think are deep, went silent. The Real Pops post was still up, but he'd turned off comments after people started asking pointed questions like, "How's that working out for you?" and "Does Real Pops have real money?" His last story before going dark was a vague post that said, "Going through some things. Need space." The irony of asking for space after his whole family dynamic imploded because he wanted space with Gregory was apparently lost on him. Gregory, true to form, was nowhere to be found online. No Facebook, No Instagram, no digital footprint whatsoever except for a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated since 2011 and listed his status as seeking opportunities. Yeah, seeking opportunities to avoid responsibility, maybe. The Reddit post kept growing. People were sharing it to other subreddits, to Twitter, to Facebook groups. I became a minor internet legend, the stepdad who finally said no. Someone even made a meme with my situation. Well, a generic stepdad figure with sunglasses and a caption, "When they replace you but forget who pays the bills," over a gif of someone walking away from an explosion. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. "Dude, you're in a TikTok now." Someone acted out the whole Dean phone call. It's got 2 million views. 2 million views. My boundary-setting moment had become viral content. Generation Z was learning about consequences through my life story. Teachers were probably using this as a cautionary tale in their classes about financial literacy and not burning bridges with people who support you. The schadenfreude was real, and I was here for all of it. Because at the end of the day, I didn't need revenge. The internet had provided it for free, with express shipping and public commentary. All I needed was my peace, my coffee that didn't taste like regret, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a sense of humor and a really good Wi-Fi connection. There's something about 1 in the morning that makes people think they're philosophers. Maybe it's the darkness, maybe it's the exhaustion, or maybe it's the crushing weight of consequences finally catching up with bad decisions. Whatever it is, that's when my phone lit up with a voice note from Miles. I was actually asleep. Shocking, I know, because apparently everyone assumed I was just sitting around waiting for their calls like some kind of customer service hotline. But no, I was deep in REM sleep, dreaming about something that definitely wasn't family drama, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand like an angry bee trapped in a jar. I grabbed it, squinted at the screen with one eye because opening both eyes at 1 a.m. is asking too much, and saw Miles's name. Not a call, a voice note. 3 minutes and 47 seconds long. That's a red flag right there. Nothing good ever comes in a voice note that's almost 4 minutes long at 1 in the morning. That's either a confession, a breakdown, or both. I hit play, mostly because I was too tired to make good decisions. His voice came through my phone speaker, cracked and broken like those cheap speakers you buy at a gas station that sound fine for exactly 1 week before they start distorting everything. "Hey, Owen, man, I don't even know where to start." "Yeah, buddy, I don't know where you'd start either. Maybe with 'I'm sorry for treating you like an ATM for 9 years.' Or perhaps, 'I'm sorry for posting that real Pops photo like you never existed.' So many options, really. I've been thinking a lot these past few days," he continued, and I could hear him sniffling like he'd been crying or was about to start. "And I didn't realize everything you did for me. All the times you drove me places, helped with homework, paid for stuff. I took it all for granted." I listened to about 30 seconds more of him rambling through his epiphany. The kind of realization that hits you when the repo man takes your car and your college is about to kick you out. Funny how clarity works like that. You never appreciate the umbrella until you're standing in the rain. And Miles was currently in a Category 5 hurricane of his own making. But I didn't play the whole thing. I stopped it at the 1-minute mark, right when he started saying something about, "if we could just talk," because I already knew where that sentence was going. It was heading straight to, "Can you please pay for everything again, because turns out real Pops doesn't have real money. Sorry doesn't pay tuition. Sorry doesn't unrepossess cars. Sorry doesn't rewind time to the moment when you should have appreciated what you had instead of chasing what you thought you wanted. Sorry is just a word people say when consequences show up to collect, and the bill is way higher than they expected." I deleted the voice note. Not out of cruelty. Well, maybe a little, but mostly because I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them sit with their choices. Let them figure out that apologies without changed behavior are just words you say to make yourself feel better. 2 hours later, because apparently nobody in this family understood the concept of sleep schedules, my email pinged. "Lydia." Subject line, "Please read this." The email itself was a masterpiece of bargaining and denial. "Owen, you've made your point. I understand you're upset. You're not a monster. I never said you were. But this has gone far enough. Miles is sorry. I'm sorry. Can we please just talk? We can figure this out together, like adults. Like adults." That phrase always cracks me up when it comes from people who've been acting like children who just discovered their parents aren't going to buy them everything they want anymore. Adults pay their own bills. Adults don't treat people like disposable income sources. Adults don't post Instagram photos declaring they're real parent while the fake one is still paying for their phone plan. I didn't respond. Not to that email or the 3 follow-ups she sent over the next hour, each one shorter and more desperate than the last. The final one didn't even have a subject line, just opened with 2 words, "Please, Owen. Please." The magic word your parents teach you as a kid, like it's some kind of spell that makes people give you what you want. Except I wasn't anyone's parent anymore. Miles had made that crystal clear, and please lost its power when you spent 9 years taking someone for granted. I was sitting outside my cottage, wrapped in a blanket because Maine mornings are cold enough to make you question your life choices. Except I was pretty solid on mine. The ocean stretched out in front of me, waves doing their thing like they've been doing for millions of years, completely indifferent to human drama. I had my coffee, still not great, but I was learning that peace doesn't require premium beans, and my phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another message. Another attempt to pull me back into the chaos I'd worked so hard to escape. I looked at my phone, then at the ocean, then back at my phone. The choice was pretty clear. I could engage, respond, get dragged back into the emotional quicksand of people who only valued me when I was useful. Or I could do nothing. Just sit here with my mediocre coffee, watch the sunrise, and let them figure out their own mess. I didn't flip my phone over to check the message. Didn't even glance at the preview. Just set it face down on the table and went back to my coffee. Because sometimes silence is the best punchline. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to stop being everyone's solution and start being your own priority. The sun kept rising. The waves kept rolling. My coffee got cold, and I just sat there, finally understanding what peace actually feels like. The thing about people who've never had to solve their own problems is that they always think there's a secret reserve fund somewhere, some magic money tree they can shake when times get tough. Lydia had been married to me long enough to know I was meticulous about finances, but apparently not long enough to actually pay attention to the details. And boy, were the details about to matter. It was Monday morning, deadline day for Miles's tuition, coincidentally, when Lydia marched herself into First National Bank like a woman on a mission. According to my source, the same neighborhood intelligence network that had been better than CNN at covering this whole saga, she dressed up for it. Power blazer, heels, the whole. I'm a serious adult here to conduct serious business costume. She probably thought looking professional would somehow make her financial situation less catastrophic. She walked up to a banker's desk, sat down with the confidence of someone who thought they had assets, and said the magic words that were about to blow up in her face. I need to pull emergency equity from my house. The banker, a middle-aged guy named Tom who'd probably seen every financial disaster imaginable in his 20-year career, nodded politely and pulled up her account. His fingers clicked across the keyboard, his eyes scanning the screen, and then his face did that thing faces do when the computer is showing them information that doesn't match reality. "Ma'am," he said slowly, in that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver news that's going to cause a scene. "I'm showing that this property was sold last month." Lydia blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain was buffering, trying to process information that made absolutely no sense. "Sold? That's impossible. I live there. Nobody sold anything." Tom turned his monitor slightly so she could see the screen, pointing at the transaction history with his pen. "According to our records, the property at 2847 Maple Street was sold on September 15th to a company called Carson Properties, LLC. The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as the sound of reality hitting someone in the face. Lydia stared at that screen like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics, her brain desperately trying to make the math make sense. "Carson," she said slowly. That's his last name." Tom, bless him, maintained his professional composure even though he could clearly see the light bulb flickering to life above her head. "I can't speak to the specifics of the ownership, ma'am, but the property is no longer under your name or your former husband's name. It's owned by Carson Properties." "But how?" Lydia sputtered, her power blazer suddenly looking a lot less powerful. He can't just sell the house. I live there. Ma'am, without seeing the full legal documentation, I can't provide specific details, but if his name was the primary on the deed and mortgage. Oh my God, Lydia said, and it wasn't a prayer. It was the sound of someone realizing they'd played checkers while their opponent was playing chess. He owned the house. The whole time. We never. Congratulations, Lydia. You just discovered what fine print looks like. Welcome to the concept of reading documents before you sign them, understanding who actually owns what, and realizing that the person you treated like a walking wallet maybe had legal ownership of the assets you thought were ours. She tried arguing with Tom, because that's what people do when they don't like what reality is telling them, but banking records don't care about your feelings. The house had been legally sold, transferred, and was no longer hers. Or rather, it had never really been hers to begin with. She'd just been living in it, assuming that marriage meant automatic ownership of everything, not realizing that the mortgage, the deed, and the property taxes had all been in my name since before we got married. She stumbled out of that bank like someone who'd just watched their safety net catch fire, probably calling me before she even got to her car. My phone, new number, new life, didn't ring. But my old number, the one I'd disconnected 3 days after leaving, that one was getting a workout. She called 17 times according to the call logs I later heard about. 17 attempts to reach a number that no longer connected to anything except a recorded message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. No rage-filled voicemail option. No chance to leave a message that I'd ignore. No opportunity for one last plea or guilt trip or manipulation attempt. Just a robot voice informing her that the line of communication, much like our relationship, was permanently disconnected. I imagine her sitting in her car in that bank parking lot, her phone in her hand, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. Calling again and again, getting the same message, maybe thinking it was a mistake or a technical glitch. Anything except the truth, which was that I'd systematically, methodically, and completely removed myself from every aspect of their lives. No dramatic goodbye. No final confrontation. No movie moment speech where I told them exactly how I felt. Just the sweet, quiet exit of a man who'd finally uninstalled chaos from his life, like deleting an app that was draining his battery. Meanwhile, I was sitting on a different beach in a different state, having upgraded my coffee situation to local roasted beans that actually tasted like someone cared about flavor. The morning sun was doing its thing. The waves were providing free therapy, and my phone, the new one, with the new number that none of them had, sat peacefully silent next to my cup. I didn't need revenge. Revenge is exhausting, requires ongoing effort, and keeps you connected to the people you're trying to move past. What I needed was peace. And maybe a strong cup of coffee to toast the most satisfying refund of my life, getting back my time, my dignity, and my bank account. The house always wins, they say. And in this case, the house was mine. Always had been. They just forgot to check who was actually holding the cards. I raised my coffee cup to the ocean, to new beginnings, to finally learning that sometimes the best thing you can do is absolutely nothing except take care of yourself. Here's to canceled subscriptions, disconnected numbers, and the beautiful sound of someone else's problems no longer being your emergency. Game over. I won.